Love doesn't care about borders, but when an ordinary Aussie woman fell for a Balinese prince, she had no clue about the wild cultural ride she was about to embark on. Yep, you heard that right. A prince. Imagine living your chill Aussie life, tossing shrimp on the barbie, and then, out of nowhere, you're swept off your feet by royalty on a tropical island. It sounds like something out of a cheesy rom-com, but this one is 100% real. So how does a woman from the land of kangaroos and surfboards end up with a prince in paradise? And what did her life turn out to be? Well, stay tuned, because this video is going to blow your mind. Our story begins with Jane Gillespie, a regular Aussie woman living the good life in sunny Australia. Born in Sydney in 1953, Jane had a pretty normal upbringing. Her dad, Colonel Rollo Gillespie, worked for the governor of New South Wales until the mid-70s. She went to some of the best schools in Sydney, got herself a degree in child psychology, and ended up as a kindergarten teacher. It was a decent gig, but nothing too exciting. Now, Jane was all about laid-back vibes. You know, good coffee, lazy beach days, a tight circle of friends, and a bit of Netflix here and there. But like anyone, she needed a break from the routine every now and then. She'd always been curious about other cultures and had a bit of wanderlust. So in June 1977, when the family was planning a holiday, Jane was the one who suggested they went to Bali for a couple of weeks, having no idea that this trip would turn her world upside down. She just wanted to go somewhere exotic, somewhere warm, where she could soak up the sun and escape the usual Aussie hustle. Bali, with its beautiful beaches, temples, and cheeky monkeys that will steal your sunglasses, seemed like the perfect spot. Jane was expecting a bit of sun, lots of relaxation, and maybe a few cocktails. What she didn't expect was to bump into a Balinese prince. I mean, who goes on vacation and ends up meeting a prince, right? Now, who is this prince she met? Here's a bit of background on him. Prince Chokade Raka Kurthiaza, or just Raka to his mates, and to keep things simple for us, is not your typical prince. Forget the Disney royal image you've got in your head. Raka's not sitting around in a golden throne room, sipping on royal tea or whatever it is that princes do. Nah, this guy is out there mingling with people, embracing life outside of the palace walls, and generally being pretty chill about the whole royalty thing. Raka had that typical princely style, charm, and that easygoing Balinese vibe that could chill out even the most stressed out person. But here's the thing that most people didn't know. He was a hopeless romantic, just looking for love without all the royal drama. Even though he was a prince, he didn't really care about the status, titles, or all those royal shenanigans. For Raka, it was all about connecting with the people, living in the moment, and hopefully finding someone who saw him for who he really was, not just his status as a prince. And that's where Jane comes in. When Jane and her family arrived in Bali, they checked into a hotel that was on royal palace land, owned by one of the two wives of Prince Chokade Agung Suyasa. The place was a perfect blend of tradition and modern life, with the lush beauty of Bali all around them. Now, Raka was the brother-in-law of the owner of the hotel, and he loved to hang around the hotel a lot, meeting tourists and talking to them about Balinese life and culture. Prince Raka had a genuine curiosity about the world and really loved meeting new people. In fact, he had been to Australia before and had a soft spot for Aussie culture. He knew his way around an Aussie barbecue, understood the laid-back vibe, and even had a few favourite spots down under. So when he heard that an Australian family was staying on the property, he couldn't resist the chance to introduce himself. For Prince Raka, it was a way to connect with a culture he had admired. And for Jane, it was the start of something she never saw coming. The two hit it off immediately, bonding over their shared interests and their love for both Bali and Australia. They talked about everything: life, love, dreams, and of course, what it's like to be on holiday in Bali. Jane was completely hooked by the way Prince Raka talked about Balinese life and culture. He had a way of explaining things that made everything feel so real and relatable. Whether he was talking about the island traditions, the spiritual side of things, or just how the community worked together, Jane found herself hanging on every word. She couldn't get enough of learning about this new world, and the way Raka shared it all made it even more fascinating. But it wasn't just Jane who was captivated. Raka was just as charmed with her. Jane's curiosity wasn't just polite small talk. She genuinely wanted to know more, asking all the right questions and diving into deep conversation. Her easygoing nature made it really easy for the prince to open up. He loved how she wasn't just interested in the surface level stuff. She really wanted to understand what made Bali tick. Pretty soon, their casual chats turned into something more. They started spending almost every day together, exploring the island and sharing stories. Raka would take Jane to some of Bali's best kept secrets, showing her the hidden gems that most tourists never get to see. They'd wander through rice paddies, visit ancient temples, or just chill on the beach, taking in the beauty of the island. For Jane, Bali felt like a whole different world compared to the busy life she knew in Sydney. Everything was so peaceful, and the way the locals lived, so connected to their culture and traditions, really spoke to her. And having Raka by her side made everything even more special. He wasn't just showing her around, he was sharing his life with her. And that made their time together feel even more magical. As they explored Bali together, it was clear that something special was happening between them. The chemistry was undeniable, and with each passing day, they were drawn closer together. Bali, with all its beauty and charm, created the perfect atmosphere for their love to blossom. Even though Jane was having the time of her life in Bali, her holiday eventually had to come to an end. Saying goodbye to the island was tough, but leaving Raka behind was even harder. They had something special, something real, and the thought of going back to her regular life in Sydney without him felt impossible. But what could she do? They were from two totally different worlds, and the future was a big question mark. Back in Sydney, Jane tried to get back into her usual routine, but it wasn't the same. Her job, which she used to find fulfilling, now felt a bit dull. The busy city life she used to love just wouldn't compare to the peace and beauty she'd found in Bali. And more than anything, she couldn't stop thinking about Raka. There were no phones back then, so all they could do was write letters back and forth, and those letters were what kept Jane going. It didn't take long for her to realize that what they had wasn't just a holiday fling. Their connection was real, and the distance only made her feelings stronger. Jane found herself constantly daydreaming about Bali, imagining what life could be like there, and most of all, thinking about Raka. She knew she had to do something about it, so in a bold move, she quit her job and headed back to Bali for a sabbatical. When she got back to Bali, it was like no time had passed. Raka was there, waiting for her, and the moment they saw each other, everything just clicked. Their connection was stronger than ever, and it wasn't long before Raka asked Jane the question she'd been hoping for. He proposed, and of course, Jane said yes. But it wasn't going to be that easy. Marrying a prince came with its own set of challenges, especially since Raka's family wasn't thrilled about him marrying a foreigner. They had their own expectations, and bringing an outsider into the royal circle wasn't part of the plan. Jane faced a lot of resistance from the family, who insisted that Raka should marry from a royal family at least, even if she wasn't Balinese. They were even suspicious and even took Jane's passport to conduct thorough background checks, involving Interpol, just to make sure she was who she claimed to be. It was a very tough and stressful time for the prince and his bride, but despite these hurdles, Raka was determined. He knew what he wanted, and he wasn't going to let anyone stand in the way of their happiness. After months of proving themselves and fighting for their relationship, they finally got the family's blessing. Their wedding in May 1978 was a grand, beautiful celebration that combined Balinese and Australian traditions. After the wedding, Jane took on the name Princess Jero Asri Kurthiaza, Jero meaning from the palace, and Asri meaning perfect or beautiful. The name marked her new status in the Balinese royal family and her embrace of this new chapter in her life. Jane really stepped into her role, immersing herself into Balinese traditions and even converting to Hinduism, becoming a well-loved figure in both the palace and the local community. But life in the palace wasn't the fairy tale it might sound like. The palace was gorgeous and full of history, but it was pretty basic when it came to modern amenities. There was no electricity, no running water, and no phones. Jane had to get used to kerosene lamps at night and had almost no way to communicate with the outside world. She couldn't even leave the palace without permission, which made her feel a bit trapped sometimes. Still, Jane was determined to make the best of her new life. She and Raka built a life together, full of love and respect, despite the cultural differences. They had their first son, Max, a year after their wedding, and he brought so much joy into their lives. But Jane also wanted her kids to know the world she grew up in, so after their second son, Bagus, was born, she and Raka decided to move back to Sydney. Moving to Australia was a huge change. Gone were the palace rituals, replaced by the everyday hustle of suburban Sydney. For Jane, it was a chance to reconnect with her roots and give her kids the best start in life. But for Raka, it was a sacrifice. He had to leave behind his royal lifestyle and take on regular jobs to support his family. Imagine going from being a prince to working as a gardener and a waiter, but Raka did it all for the sake of his children. Despite the challenges, they made it work. They had a daughter, Maya, and made sure their kids grew up with a deep appreciation for both their Balinese and Australian heritage. After nearly 12 years in Sydney, the family decided it was time to return to Bali, where their story had begun. Going back to Bali felt like coming home. The kids were older, more independent, and ready to dive into the culture and the language. Jane and Raka resumed their roles within the royal family and the community. Today, Raka has taken on a leadership role in Ubud, working to keep Balinese traditions alive, while Jane and their son Max run a popular restaurant called Biku. The place is known for its delicious food and famous high teas, mixing Balinese and Western flavors. Biku has become a go-to spot for both locals and tourists, who are often surprised to learn it's owned by a real-life princess. Even after all of these years, Jane and Raka's love is as strong as ever. They still go out on dates, watch movies together, and happily share their incredible story with anyone who's curious. Their life is a true testament to the power of love, proving that it's not just all about the big moments, but about all the little things that make a life worth living. And that's a wrap for today, folks. Next time you're on holiday, keep your eyes open. You never know when you might bump into a prince, or better yet, when you might find your own fairy tale waiting to happen. So what do you think? Could this happen to you? Or is it all a bit too good to be true? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more unbelievable stories like this. See you next time.